are you seeing?
Fall colors. Lots of pretty trees. Well, that one's past its prime, but fall colors.
Okay, so where are we going today?
We're going to QFC, Quality Food Center, a grocery store, to buy ingredients for our very first Cooking with Pazan Academy video. I'm very excited. Fall colors. Got my list because even though it's a few ingredients, I'm bound to forget something if I don't write it down. So for the recipe, we need 3 types of nuts. We need almonds, hazelnuts, and they call for walnuts, but I don't like walnuts, so I'm going to get pecans. So change of plans, we ended up at Trader Joe's, and here we are, and they have hazelnuts. We've got everything we need, so let's get back to the kitchen and start cooking. Hi, welcome to Cooking from the Past with Pazan Academy. I'm Deanna, and this is a show where we take recipes from history and recreate them in the modern world. Today I'm going to take a recipe that dates from about the 4th century BC, from the time after Alexander the Great had already conquered much of the known world. And so this is a Macedonian recipe from a Macedonian wedding feast. Now in this time period, because of the expansion of the empire, there were all of these new flavors and spices and tastes and foods, and those spread and actually changed some of the Greek cuisine, and it really expanded it. And so this recipe is recorded in history. It was a wedding banquet, and it was actually pretty opulent. So we know about this wedding feast from a man named Hippolochus who was present, and he wrote a letter to his friend Licinius of Samos. And in that letter, he describes the banquet, and there are so many courses, and we're going to make one of the ending courses, the sweets. But we know about this from primary sources, and that's how we know a lot about these historic recipes, is that they've been preserved. Some of them are fragmented in ancient papyri. Some of them have been recorded. We have them from medieval manuscripts. In the Renaissance, we have actual cookbooks. And so there's a lot of these recipes, and they're really fun to make in the modern world. And so this particular recipe is preserved in the writings of Athenaeus, and we have those writings today. And so that letter that was written, we know about. So we know about all the different courses. This recipe that we're going to be using comes from this book, the Classical Cookbook, and they have recipes from other courses from that same banquet, but we're going to be making the Alexandrian Sweets. And there are 2 versions of this. There's the Yttria that only takes 2 ingredients, and then there's the Gastria, which we're going to be making, which has a few more ingredients. And there's some variations that you can also do that I'll talk about when we get into the actual recipe. When we're recreating these recipes, sometimes we have to make substitutions because we just don't have the same foods. They're not available. Some things may not be around anymore. Some things we may not even be sure of what they mean. They may have had a different name or a different reference to something that we do have, but we just don't know that's what they called it. You have to be creative on occasion. For the ones that we're making today, we know what they used, and again, we'll be making a little more complex Gastria version and adding in a few extra ingredients. So we have all of our ingredients, and I've measured out 3/4 cup honey, 1 cup of sesame seeds, raw, 1/4 cup each of raw almonds, hazelnuts, and pecans. The recipe calls for walnuts, but I prefer pecans, so I'm substituting those. And then we can also use dried fruit. So I've chosen golden raisins and cranberries that I just had in my pantry. The first thing we need to do is chop up the nuts. So I'm going to go ahead and place all 3 of the nuts in the chopper. We need 3/4 cup total. So we'll just empty our nut mixture, and we're going to toast these with the sesame seeds. on 350 until they're golden brown. So you can just put them all on a tray together and then toast those. So we're going to place our combination of nuts and sesame seeds in the toaster oven, or you can use a regular oven, set at 350, and then you'll carefully watch them because you just want them slightly browned and toasted. While that's toasting, I'm going to quickly just roughly chop up the raisins and the cranberries into smaller pieces, and then these will be ready to go when we combine all of our ingredients. So it's still toasting, and I'm just going to shake up the tray a little bit to mix them up and get the top seeds on the bottom and the bottom seeds on the top, so everything gets toasted. Okay, so our sesame seeds and nuts are toasted. You'll also be able to smell them a little bit toasting, and then that's how you also know that they're ready, but they should be a little bit golden brown. This is the color you want them, a little browned, but not too dark. We'll let these cool for a little bit, and then we're going to head over to the stove and cook our honey. We're going to take our 3/4 cup honey and put it into a saucepan, and we're going to bring this to a boil and then skim it, and then we're going to simmer it for 7 minutes. While the honey is simmering, I'm going to take the sesame seed and nut mixture that's been toasted and just pour it into a bowl, add the fruit that I've chopped, and then stir it up. And this is going to get added to the honey after the honey simmers. You're going to need a low baking dish or maybe a high-rimmed cookie sheet like this one. And while the honey is simmering, you can do this, or you can do what I did before I even started making the recipe. I prepped this. I just lined it with parchment paper and then sprayed it with some cooking oil because you're going to be pouring the mixture on here to let it cool for a little bit. So while the honey is simmering, you can be prepping the pan, combining the nut and sesame seed mixture with fruit if that's what you're using, or just have it ready to go in a bowl for you to mix the honey with. But I just want to show you that it shouldn't simmer any higher than what you see here. If it's boiling, then you're going to want to turn it down, remove it from the heat a little bit. You do want to keep it at a constant temperature, but it shouldn't have too much of a film over it at this stage. After the timer, it goes off for 7 minutes. You can either add the nut mixture to the pan that you're using, but because I am using a smaller saucepan, I'm going to add the honey to my nut mixture in the bowl. So you'll add that, and then you're going to just stir it all together. And then you're going to put it on your prepared baking sheet to let it cool, and you'll spread it out evenly. And you're not going to be cutting it from this sheet. You're actually going to be forming it into balls in a little bit, so it doesn't have to be perfect on the cookie sheet. So while that is cooling to where we can touch it, I'm going to cut little squares out of waxed paper that we're going to wrap the little candies in. Okay, so we have our papers ready to go. Our mixture is cool. I'm going to grab a little bit of butter that is room temperature, so it's a little bit soft. And then I have a bowl to put them in when I'm done. And I am going to butter my hands so the honey doesn't stick. And you will thank yourself later when you're doing that. Otherwise, you're going to have sticky honey sesame seeds on you. And then you're just going to roll them in little balls. Place it in one of the wrappers that you've cut. And then kind of fold it up and twist it. And you have little honey goodies that you can share. So these have had a little bit of time to set. So let's try one of our Alexandrian sweets. As you can see, there's a little bit sticky from the honey. And you can see the nuts and the seeds and the little fruit. That is really good. It's not too sweet. You can definitely taste the fruit and the sesame seeds and the nuts, but this is really good. These were served at the end of the wedding feast. So after many courses of meat, and when you read about this particular feast, it's just astronomical how much food was served. Definitely more than any one person could eat. And then being given gifts at a wedding instead of having to bring the gifts. So it's a really fun, interesting tradition to read about. Next time you have a dinner party, you can make some Alexandrian sweets and serve these at the end.